Number 10. Chris D'Elia. Chris is one of the only people on this list who was fired and replaced after the film had wrapped shooting. Chris D'Elia was well known for his stand-up career, but has been attempting to make a move to TV and film for the past few years. In 2021, he snagged a role in Zack Snyder's upcoming zombie action flick on Netflix, Army of the Dead. Initially, he was cast to play one of the Marines dropped into the middle of a zombie-infested Vegas to rob a rich guy's bank vault. And yeah, that's basically the plot of the movie. He starred alongside action heavyweights like Dave Bautista, Omari Hardwick, and Hiroyuki Sanada, who I respect so much, please don't slice me up for mispronouncing your name. The film had completely wrapped production when numerous allegations surrounding Chris's misconduct began to surface, and it turned out that they were all absolutely accurate. It was ultimately decided that Chris would be deleted from the project and replaced by comedian Tig Notaro. Snyder ended up having to ramp production back in full gear and film all of D'Elia's scenes with Tig in his place. The universe works in mysterious ways, however, though, as Tig's turn as Marianne Peters is considered to be the overall best part of the movie, which isn't really saying much because Zack was clearly trying stuff during this movie and it just didn't work at all. He somehow made a zombie tiger more hilarious than adorable. I'm not sure how you do that. Number 9. Julianne Moore. Creative differences. The phrase that has been behind some of the most tragic Hollywood stories of films that could have been, and in this case, roles. For an industry centered around creativity, the movie industry can be awfully risk averse, especially when it comes to the decision of casting your lead. It's not uncommon for actors to suddenly be thrust out of productions in lieu of a new face, or in some cases, the original choice that they had been replacing. A good example of doing it to yourself, though, is Julianne Moore. The actor for films like the 2013 reboot of Carrie and the action flick Kingsman: The Golden Circle was set to play the leading lady in the acclaimed dramedy Can You Ever Forgive Me? She was casted as the character Lee Israel, a writer who falls out of step with current culture and decides to embellish her writing, basically inventing the concept of fake news. Julianne began filming her scenes, but was asked to leave the production only a month into filming. According from the director Nicole's portrayal of her character was not what she had in mind while writing. You see, Julianne played the role with just too much of herself influencing overall. When directed to try and play the role in another way, Julianne just continued to give a similar performance and was ultimately replaced by Melissa McCarthy, better known for her more comedic roles in movies like The Heat and Bridesmaids, but her turn as Lee is considered to be one of her greatest acting achievements of all time, even landing her a nomination for Best Actress at the 2019 Oscar ceremony. Julianne didn't take the news all that well, but did eventually move on and has made a couple of solid flicks ever since, so I don't know, it all worked out in the end at this one. Number 8. Colin Firth. The Paddington movies, based on the classic children's book written by Michael Bond, are some of the most critically acclaimed family films of the 21st century. When it came out, Paddington 2 actually ranked over Citizen Kane as the most universally loved movie ever made. One of the many reasons that this franchise is so successful is due in part to the voice behind the bear, Ben Whishaw, whose last name sounds like the noise ninjas make in movies. Whishaw! It surprises many to know, however, that Ben was actually a last-minute replacement for the first pick, Colin Firth. Colin was initially attached to voice the titular bear through the entirety of the first film's production, with a trailer even being released including some of his pre-recorded dialogue. Colin is another actor who recorded every single one of their lines before getting the rug ripped out from underneath them. According to Firth, he actually wasn't informed that he had been replaced until the film was released without his voice in the role. He told Entertainment Weekly, "It's been bittersweet to see this delightful creature take shape and come to the sad realization that he simply doesn't have my voice." The decision was actually due to his voice just not fitting with the bear during the editing process. He sounded a bit too mature and proper, whereas Ben's turn as the character is bubbly and considered to be one of the most loved modern cartoon bears since Yogi and Boo Boo. Number 7. Eric Stoltz. Alright, let's talk a little bit about the 1985 comedy sci-fi Back to the Future. I loved this movie growing up. The story followed Marty McFly, a high school student who's accidentally sent back to 1955 in a DeLorean invented by his close friend and scientist Dr. Emmett Brown, played by Christopher Lloyd, and he's forced to get his future parents back together before he disappears from existence entirely. Seriously, whoever pitched that movie must have been lacking in sleep. The film went on to spawn 2 sequels, creating what is considered to be one of the greatest film trilogies of all time. While Michael J. Fox may have played the iconic Marty McFly, he actually was not the first actor to don the puffy vest on set. A young man named Eric Stoltz was initially casted to play the role. You may not recognize Eric's face, as his most famous character was drenched in prosthetics and makeup, playing the character of Roy L. Dennis in the film Mask. He's a man with severe facial and skull deformities. He was nearly halfway through shooting the flick when the news came that he was going to be replaced with Michael J. Fox. Fox was actually the director Robert Zemeckis' first choice, but was initially unable to sign on to the project due to his prior commitments to the sitcom Family Ties. Eventually though, the two studios were able to find a way to work out his schedule and allow him to film both projects simultaneously. This is why you may notice that the majority of scenes that take place outside are actually at night, as it was the only time that he could film for a good 60% of the shoot. Robert wanted Eric out from the beginning, however, as his portrayal of the character was far more intense than the writers had in mind. Not to mention, Eric's read of the end of the movie was a tragedy instead of a happy ending. Hey, spoiler alert, at the end of the first film, Marty returns to 1985 after successfully getting his parents together, but instead of being poor and sad, the family is now thriving and successful. Somehow Eric took that as Marty being an outsider in a world that he didn't know, but just look at the truck that was parked in his garage when he got back. There's nothing tragic about that. His intensity combined with his depressing performance of the finale got him kicked off of the shoot only minutes after Fox became available. Number 6. Samantha Morton. A little Oscar gem was released in 2013 called Her. It's a romantic drama starring the future Joker actor Joaquin Phoenix as a man who becomes entranced with his new AI Samantha, who was voiced by Scarlett Johansson. She may just be a phone, but hey man, I'd fall for a Siri if she sounded like that too. However, the initial voice of Samantha was supposed to be portrayed by Walking Dead actor Samantha Morton, who actually recorded all of her lines for the character before she was let go. The reason? Well, apparently her portrayal of Samantha just did not vibe with what they had in mind for the character. When they got into the editing room, the team discovered that Samantha and Joaquin's performances just didn't mesh together in the way that was intended. Director Spike Jonze revealed at the 2013 American Film Institute Festival that Samantha was really involved with Joaquin had to work with on set. Her voice was being played in his ear during almost every scene to help with his delivery. Things were going well, but after reviewing the footage of his performance, it was clear that this was not going to be the right combination. These guys had zero chemistry together. They let her go and replaced her with Scarlett Johansson, who actually had to record her lines in between filming Captain America: Winter Soldier. It's hard to convey real emotions through voice acting at times, but Scarlett had no problem with that. It was nominated for Best Picture, and Spike Jonze won an Oscar for Best Original Screenplay. I know the description of this movie is a little weird, but hey, definitely give it a watch if you've never seen it. Number 5. Holly Hunter. If you took a poll of the best Disney movies of all time, you'll likely see that the animated kids classic Chicken Little is one of the worst movies that Disney's ever produced. My girlfriend and I watched it like a month ago and it does not hold up at all, just trash. The movie, released in 2005, was Disney's 46th animated feature and holds the title of being their very first fully computer animated movie. Toy Story doesn't count as it's technically a Pixar property which specializes in CGI content, so suck it up. Disney got pretty far into production with the actress Holly Hunter, who you may recognize from shows like Saving Grace or Succession, but she's probably best known by her voice playing the role of Elastigirl in the Pixar classic The Incredibles. She was initially cast to play the titular chicken, and the studio had over half of her lines recorded for the flick, but then decided to shift the project into a more action-packed movie. They rewrote the protagonist as a boy instead of a girl, because girls can't do boy stuff, that's insane! After over 8 months of voiceover work for Hunter, she was replaced with comedian and Scrubs actor Zach Braff. It didn't matter what the studio did, this movie was destined to be a flop and currently sits at a score of 37% on Rotten Tomatoes. I know her being fired had nothing to do with her attitude, but her being recasted because the studio wanted to shift the gender of her character to appeal to boys, I mean come on, that's pretty messed up and deserves to be mentioned. Number 4. Henry Winkler. Henry Winkler is best known for his role as the Fonz on Happy Days, and he was set to direct Tom Hanks in his much-loved buddy cop movie Turner and Hooch. Unfortunately, these two had a pretty rough history together before that though. The Fonz had actually fought with Hanks in character on the set of Happy Days for one episode a few years prior. It would appear that Tom wishes he could fight Henry for real though, as rumor has it, the two of them just never got along at all. So much so that a few days into shooting Turner and Hooch with Henry behind the wheel, Hanks ordered Winkler to be removed from the set and replaced as the director. That's the kind of power Tom Hanks wields, you know? He can just walk on set and be like, no. Not only did Tom complain that Henry's behavior as director was annoying, he claimed that Henry was just overall bad at his job. He would take double the average time to reset a shot on set, he had minimal control over his actors, and he was apparently just always frustrated with having a dog on set. Like he didn't even read the script before he took the gig. That dog is a national treasure, man! What makes this firing even more tragic is the fact that when Winkler was delivered the news, one of the film's producers ripped Henry's contract up right in front of his face. Over the years, when asked about the incident, Henry denies that he's ever had any kind of personal or professional issues with Tom, but Tom's never given us any reason to think that he would lie about something like that. What would he have to gain, you know? Haha, I've defeated the Fonz. Like, hey man, so did ABC when they cancelled the show. Number 3, Jean-Claude Van Damme. The Belgian actor Jean-Claude Van Damme was just on the verge of coming into his own career as the muscles from Brussels when he landed a job opposite of Arnold Schwarzenegger in 1987's action flick Predator. This sounded like the perfect casting choice. Jean would have worked alongside the likes of Carl Weathers and Jesse Ventura. While that may have turned out cool, the reality was that Jean wasn't casted to play a role as one of the Marines at all. Instead, he was casted to play the titular Predator himself. The special effects artist behind the project's Call the Experience was Jean as a hilarious comedy of errors, in which no party knew exactly what the other was expecting. Apparently, nobody had informed Jean that the role was basically just a glorified stuntman. They were prepared to direct him to just hop around like a frog, but Jean was obviously confused and upset with that choice. According to Jean, he had just gotten off the boat and was under the impression that he was going to be showcasing his martial arts skills to the world, but was instead reduced to a massive, slow-moving alien with dreadlocks. To the surprise of absolutely nobody, Van Damme was furious and dispirited about spending the entire movie cooped up in a clunky and often ridiculous-looking suit, and was ultimately fired and replaced with Kevin Peter Hall. The idea that he was just on set I can barely move in this thing, oh man, it just makes me so happy. Number 2, Dennis Hopper. Dennis Hopper is one of the groundbreaking actors and directors of the 1960s and 70s New Hollywood, eventually finding his niche in the early 90s, playing villains in films like Speed, Waterworld, and the live-action Mario movie where he plays Bowser. Yes, that exists, and no, it's not good. So it came as no surprise when he was casted to play Christoph, the all-powerful TV producer controlling Truman Burbank's life in the film The Truman Show. The cast was stacked and included Hollywood heavyweight Jim Carrey as the titular Truman. Anyone with a brain cell would have been excited to be a part of this film, still considered to be one of Jim's best dramatic performances. However, 2 days into shooting his scenes for Christoph, which were only expected to take maybe 10 days, Hopper was unceremoniously let go from the set. Apparently, Dennis had a contract in place with producer Scott Rudin that he'd be fired should his work be unsatisfactory, and he must have been pretty bad in the role, as the director, Peter Weir, had been described as an extremely reluctant man to ever remove anyone from a set. Reports later surfaced that Hopper was basically half asleep while playing the character, and while Christoph wasn't necessarily written to be a manic madman, he did require just a little bit of effort to be properly pulled off. Ultimately, Ed Harris stepped in to play the role after production had been desperately trying to replace Dennis to avoid having the film shut down entirely. Thankfully, that never happened, and The Truman Show has gone on to be one of the most depressingly heartfelt Jim Carrey performances ever released on film. Oh, and Ed actually got nominated for an Oscar, so sorry Dennis, looks like they made a good movie without you. And at number 1, Johnny Depp. When Pirates of the Caribbean actor Johnny was announced to star as Gellert Grindelwald in the Fantastic Beasts series, it immediately sparked controversy and shock. In the same year that the first film was set to release, 2016, Depp had just received his first public accusation of the situation surrounding him and Amber Heard. While Depp was only briefly involved in the first film, the second film, Crimes of Grindelwald, features his character in the prominent villain role. After losing his first libel suit against the British tabloid The Sun in 2020, Depp was ultimately asked to resign from the role, with Warner Brothers claiming that the bad press associated with Johnny would bog down the film's release, which was not ideal considering they were trying to make as much money as possible before streaming giant HBO took over the property. When this decision was made, the production on the third film, Secrets of Dumbledore, had already begun, with Johnny even filming his first scene. Because he filmed something at all, the studio was forced forced to pay him his entire $16 million check for the production. Critically acclaimed performer Mads Mikkelsen was brought in to replace Depp in the third film, with there literally being like zero explanation as to why Grindelwald changed his face. This movie's set in the magic world. You telling me that they couldn't have just dropped in a little nugget of info during a fight or something, like, "You're going to perish. Oh, and by the way, there's a really good plastic surgeon around the corner. You should check him out."
Number 10, Rose McGowan. So let's talk about the show Charmed for a second, a solid series that was on air for basically 10 years. The series followed three sisters that discover they are descendants of a long line of good female witches and are destined to fight against the forces of evil. Yes, it was a very fun show, however, just because you play sisters on set does not mean that you're always going to be close in real life. Rose McGowan and Alyssa Milano had a very public altercation that resulted in a little incident on set being shared with the world. Rose claimed that Alyssa threw a fit in front of the crew, yelling, "They don't pay me enough to do this stuff," only she didn't say stuff. She called Alyssa's behavior appalling, claiming she cried every time that the show got renewed for another season because it just meant more time on a toxic set. Alyssa never shared her comments on the situation, confirming what she was being accused of. Number 9, Richard Gere. Richard Gere is one of those actors that doesn't really act. Sometimes people just get hired for films because they have a face for it or the style. For Richard, he did not have enough class and moxie to keep a handle on his role in the film Lords of the Flatbush. He was casted to star line Rocky himself, Sylvester Stallone, and according to Sly, the two didn't get along at all. Their beef was strong and long-lasting throughout the entire production until it finally came to a head one day when Richard was a bit too into one scene and he actually grabbed Sylvester pretty aggressively by the collar. When Sly told him to lay off, he laid in instead. The scene was being filmed on Coney Island, and when the actors took a minute to take a break, they tried to break each other. Sly was eating a hot dog alone in his car, which sounds pretty peaceful, and suddenly Richard stormed in, joined him with half of a chicken dripping in mustard, and despite his warnings about the mustard, seriously, it dripped all over his pants. In true Rocky fashion, he elbowed Richard in the face, threw him out of his car, and the altercation resulted in Richard being fired from the project. Oh no, they had to decide between Richard Gere and Rocky. I wonder how quick that decision was. Number 8, Selma Blair. It's funny that this entry involves Charlie Sheen getting a woman fired when he himself has been fired from so many projects because of, well, several reasons. After being fired from 2.5 Men, Sheen returned to the acting world, headlining his own show called Anger Management. It premiered in 2012 with cast featuring Hellboy alumni Selma Blair playing his colleague and friend with benefits on the show. However, Sheen's terrible behavior continued to haunt him from his 2.5 Men days. Blair was very vocal on her problems with Charlie, especially his messy work ethic. Charlie heard and he was having none of that, so he threatened to quit the show if Blair was going to remain a part of the cast. Sheen got his way and Blair was let go after starring in 54 episodes. The show didn't last long though. Who would have guessed that a messy actor being the lead was a bad idea? It got cancelled in 2014. Next up, 7, Shannen Doherty. Unfortunately for Shannen Doherty, she gained quite the reputation in Hollywood for being fired due to issues with her co-stars. She may or may not be making another appearance on this list. Who knows? Guess you'll have to stick around to find out. For the first entry, we're going to look back to the very popular series teen drama 90210, a series following the lives of the Walsh family as they moved from Minneapolis to Beverly Hills. Doherty played the character Brenda Walsh, with her character eventually befriending several students at Beverly Hills High, including Donna Martin, played by Tori Spelling. The series was a hit after its initial season, however, with increased popularity came massive egos. Doherty and Spelling started clashing on set constantly, adding additional drama to the production team that really just didn't need to be there. Considering Tori's father, Aaron Spelling, was the producer on the show, it's pretty simple to piece together what happened. Doherty claimed that she was officially let go for having a haircut that messed up the continuity of the show, but a wig could have fixed that, so better believe Tori Spelling told her papa to boot her from the series. Number 6, Edward Norton. As we all know, Edward Norton didn't last long as the Incredible Hulk in the MCU, only being in one movie in 2008. By the way, I've read some of the comments, and no, Edward Norton was not the first person to play the Hulk on screen. The honor goes to Lou Ferrigno and Bill Bixby from the original series, and don't you dare get me started on Eric Bana, looking like he's farting every time he turns into the Hulk. The 2008 film was a success, but not a massive box office goat. The studio were at odds and they wanted to keep using the Hulk and incorporate him into the Avengers, but Edward Norton was becoming increasingly difficult to work with. When he was contacted to keep playing the character, he demanded more money from the studio. However, he was already on thin ice following his time filming The Incredible Hulk. While not some wild on-set meltdown, Norton did make some pretty odd choices. For instance, as part of his contract, he was allowed to rewrite the script as much as he wanted, but it still needed to be approved. So he wrote new scripts over and and over again until we got the 2008 Incredible Hulk movie with some of Ed's ideas baked into the final script. Kevin Feige claims that the choice to part ways with Ed was not based on money, but instead on Marvel just wishing to hire an actor that embodies the creative and collaboration side of their talented members. Essentially, he was like, Mark Ruffalo's nicer than you and he doesn't write his scripts, so bye bye. This ended up being a great decision on both parts though, because Mark Ruffalo is fantastic as Bruce Banner and the Hulk, and Edward went on to make several high quality films, including a few collaborations with Wes Anderson. Moonrise Kingdom would not have been the same without Edward Norton as Scoutmaster Ward. Number 5. Anne Hathaway. So a fun fact that I was unaware of until today, Anne Hathaway was almost a secondary lead in one of the most universally loved Seth Rogen movies of all time. Knocked Up from 2007 follows Seth Rogen and Katherine Heigl as they prepare for the arrival of an unplanned baby after a one-night stand. The cast was packed with stellar comedians like Paul Rudd, Jonah Hill, Leslie Mann, so many more, and the cast almost featured an up-and-coming actor at the time, Anne Hathaway. Anne is famous these days for roles in movies like Princess Diary, Interstellar, and Ocean's 8. These days, she's considered to be at the top of the A-list. In 2013, she even took home her first Oscar for Best Supporting Actress. Now, before this though, she actually agreed to be in Knocked Up because she thought the script was great and that Seth Rogen, is Seth Rogen. You work with him every chance you can. However, she eventually decided not to participate in the film after one issue with the script became cause for concern. The scene in question was one of the final moments in the film, which for those of you who have seen the movie know is pretty graphic. The birthing scene in Knocked Up ended up being a combination of Katherine acting and some close-up clips of her cookie. Anne read that part and decided that her first role in a major comedy movie should maybe be something else. Although it was confirmed that it was not going to be her bits and bobs on display, she has a no birthday suit clause. It worked out for everyone though, because Katherine did a great job despite hating the set apparently, and Anne Hathaway is one of the biggest movie stars to date, so good for her. Number 4, Dennis Hopper. Dennis Hopper is one of the groundbreaking actors and directors from the 1960s and 70s New Hollywood, eventually finding his niche in the early 90s, playing villains in movies like Speed, Waterworld, and the live-action Mario Brothers movie, where he plays Bowser. Yes, that exists. No, it's not good. So it came as no surprise when he was casted to play Kristoff, the all-powerful TV producer controlling Truman Burbank's life in the movie The Truman Show. The cast was incredible and included Hollywood heavyweight Jim Carrey as the titular Truman. Anyone with a brain cell would have been excited to be a part of this film, still considered to be one of his best dramatic performances. However, 2 days into filming his scenes for Kristoff, which were only expected to take about 10 days to film, Hopper was unceremoniously let go from the set. Apparently, Dennis had a contract in place with producer Scott Rudin that he would be fired should his work be unsatisfactory. He must have been pretty bad in the role, as the director Peter Weir has been described as extremely reluctant to ever remove an actor from a movie. Reports later surfaced that Hopper was basically half asleep while playing the character, and while Kristoff wasn't written to be like a manic man or anything, he did require some effort to be properly pulled off. Ultimately, Ed Harris stepped in to play the role after production had been desperately trying to replace Dennis to avoid having the film be shut down entirely. Thankfully, that never happened, and The Truman Show has gone on to be one of the most depressingly heartfelt Jim Carrey performances ever. Oh, and Ed actually got nominated for an Oscar, so sorry Dennis, looks like it was a good move. Number 3, Jean-Claude Van Damme. The Belgian actor Jean-Claude Van Damme was just on the verge of coming into his own career as the Muscles from Brussels when he landed a job opposite of Arnold Schwarzenegger in 1987's action flick Predator. This sounded like the perfect casting choice. Jean would have worked alongside the likes of Carl Weathers and Jesse Ventura. While this may have turned out cool, the reality was that Jean wasn't casted to play one of the Marines at all. Instead, he was casted to play the titular Predator himself. The special effects artists behind the project called the experience with Jean as a hilarious comedy of errors, in which no party knew exactly what the other was expecting. Apparently, nobody actually told him that the role was basically just a glorified stuntman. They were prepared to direct him to just hop around like a frog, but Jean was obviously confused and upset with that choice. According to him, he had just gotten off the boat and was under the impression that he was going to be showcasing his martial arts skills to the world, but instead he was reduced to a massive, slow-moving alien with dreadlocks. To the surprise of absolutely nobody, Van Damme was furious and dispirited about spending the entire movie cooped up in a clunky and often ridiculous-looking suit, and he was ultimately fired and replaced with Kevin Peter Hall. The idea that he was just on set being like, I can barely move in this thing, it makes me so happy. Number 2, Janet Hubert. Will Smith got his big break in the acting world thanks to the success of the sitcom Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. It's a show following Will as the titular prince, living with a wealthy family in Bel-Air surrounded by cousins, uncles, and of course Aunt Vivian. In season 1, Aunt Viv was played by a woman named Janet Hubert Whitten, but as a lot of people know, she was recasted after an on-set feud with Will Smith went a little bit too far. According to Will, Janet viewed him as an antagonist in her life. She had been in the business for years, and suddenly Will Smith popped into her life, and she had a tinge of jealousy towards him because he got into town, got a gig. Well, hey, that's what happens when you're good. She was trying to convince the producers to give her character more screen time and allow her to breathe on camera, but they said no because it wasn't the Aunt Viv show. She fought back hard, but it was ultimately decided that she would be asked to sit out the rest of the series and was replaced by Daphne Maxwell Reid, who is Aunt Viv. Number 1, Thomas Gibson. Thomas made a name for himself, starring as one of the leads of the series Criminal Minds. He was on the show for a few years, and in that time he made quite a few problems for those unfortunate enough to be staff members of the series. There were a few issues over the years that would have warranted some action, like screaming at producers and writers for not doing a good job. But the incident that got him kicked off of the show for good involved, well, a kick. In 2016, Thomas was swiftly fired from the series after an incident with a writer named Virgil Williams. An internal investigation revealed that Thomas kicked Virgil one day during production of an episode that Gibson was actually directing. And as I said, this isn't the first incident on set that really should have resulted in some kind of punishment, because 3 years earlier, in 2013, he pleaded no contest to no juice related reckless driving after being arrested under suspicion of DUI, and 3 years before that, he allegedly shoved an assistant director, Ian Wolfe, during a late night location scene. That led to the studio ordering Gibson to take 8 hours of anger management. According to most people on the set, Thomas was a wild card. Some days he was friendly and accommodating, and the next he went ballistic.
At number 10, we have Christian Bale. Christian is a versatile actor physically and skill-wise. He's able to shrink and grow his physique seemingly at will. He's played everything from a skinny substance addict to Batman. In 2008, Christian starred in a third film of the Terminator franchise, Terminator Salvation, and while he was filming, a scene director of photography, Shane Hurlbut, apparently moved into Christian's eyesight. This caused Christian to snap out of character and into defense mode. The now infamous audio clip of Christian screaming at Shane. To make matters worse, anyone trying to calm Christian down were met with an equally swift verbal lashing. While the cinematographer was just checking a light to make sure it was in the right place, aka doing his job, Bale made it his mission to share his intense feelings with the entire crew. When the audio leaked, Bale apologized for his actions and told the world to praise the crew for their work. While the movie turned out okay, visually speaking, the project as a whole is remembered as the worst entry in the Terminator franchise to date. At number 9, we have Joaquin Phoenix. We understand a dedication to one's craft, and Joaquin Phoenix is a prime example. Joaquin's acting career has been going steady since he first appeared in the 1989 comedy Parenthood when he was in his mid-teens. While he's seen as one of the greatest actors in recent history, his reputation on set has been tarnished thanks to a little freakout while filming the 2018 solo flick Joker. He appeared on Jimmy Kimmel Live to promote the shoot when Jimmy played a behind-the-scenes clip of Joaquin getting loud and angry at a man named Larry and the constant whispering behind the cameras before dropping a few F-bombs and storming off set. When the cameras came back to the studio, Joaquin was frozen in shock, clearly not expecting the clip to ever see the light of day. He explained that Larry was a cinematographer who had teased Joaquin off set earlier that day, calling him a diva. He then explained that there's a lot of pressure on set, especially in a closed space like the apartment from the scene. He apologized to the audience for having to see him behave in such a manner, which was met with applause. At the end of the day, he's a performer and no harm came from the outburst. If Larry's cool with it, so are we. At number 8, we have Ewan McGregor. The last thing any actor needs while filming on location is something from the paparazzi coming up and demanding their attention. One such incident took place with Obi-Wan Kenobi himself. Ewan was on location in New York filming a scene for the Netflix series Halston when he was spotted approaching photographer Steve Sands for being too chatty during a take. McGregor then let out some choice words before snapping back into character and filming a scene with a co-star Kelly Bishop. Not only did nobody on set blame him at all, the cameraman actually apologized and they were able to laugh the whole thing off. I've seen what this guy can do with a lightsaber and none of us should be getting on his bad side. At number 7, we have Tom Cruise. Now, we know Tom Cruise is insane, there's no denying that, and he may be one of Hollywood's biggest and brightest in his early days, but his career and skills as an actor have been slowly going downhill since he divorced Katie Holmes. To prove his insanity and rage, let's talk about an incident that occurred on his last Mission Impossible movie, an audio clip that was released of Cruise berating several crew members with intense anger. The crew in question were accused of not following safety protocols that were in place at the time. In the rant, Tom was heard swearing and screaming about the rules and how if he wants something to happen, it will happen. The crew are essentially his minions who must do their master's bidding. The rant went viral when Cruise defended the rant rather than apologize for it, claiming that he said what he said and the stakes were at an all-time high. While this may have happened at a time when Hollywood was shut down down and many productions were on hold, that's no excuse to harass the people trying to make you look good. At number 6 we have Clay and Crawford. When actors portray their best friends on screen, you expect the friendship to seep through them in real life, right? Well, wrong. Clay and Crawford and comedian Damon Wayans started working together on a series remake of the hit action film franchise Lethal Weapon in 2016, and the show was well received. The pair seemed to have good chemistry on camera and made us want to see more of their friendship. Behind the scenes, however, these two could not stand each other. The set was plagued with multiple altercations that bogged down production to the point where Clay's character was written out of the show and replaced with Dukes of Hazzard star Sean William Scott. Following the recasting announcement on set, audio was leaked of the pair bickering like an old married couple just moments before snapping into character for their scene. The clip clearly shows Clay trying to egg Damon on, and this clip was recorded only a few days following a stunt gone wrong Clay directed, and that left Damon with a nasty head wound. The show did great without him, but was cancelled after only 4 short seasons. We need more of Sean William Scott in the world, bring it back. Number 5 we have Orson Welles. Orson was the man behind what many film schools consider the greatest piece of cinematography ever put to film, Citizen Kane. I've never seen it, so I can't comment any further. Orson did a lot of voiceover work back in the day and had one particularly terrible time trying to record a radio ad for the food company Findus in 1970. Behind the scenes, Otto shows Orson going on a rant after being asked to emphasize the words in and beef, before calling the man running the show some choice words and telling him to let Orson hear what he's supposed to sound like. He complains about the content of the script after fumbling the name of a Norwegian fisherman. He just kind of mumbles his way to the end of the script before claiming the content was unoriginal and uninspiring. The guy was reading an ad that contained the word beef. Sorry if nobody found that inspirational. At number 4 we have Casey Kasem. Casey's face is certainly one you do not know, but his voice certainly is. Casey voiced the original portrayal of the popular cartoon character Shaggy in the mystery series Scooby-Doo. During his time outside of the recording booth, Casey actually used to run a daytime radio show. The content of one broadcast in particular sparked a very heated reaction from Casey. In 1985, he was asked to read a dedication request about a fan's dog that had passed away. The dedication read, "Recently there was a passing in our family. He was a little dog named Snuggles." Casey was audibly upset as the statement was meant to follow a relatively happy song. He was sent into a tangent in which he made it clear that this kind of thing had kept happening to him for a while now, not holding back a single thought on the matter. Following the incident, the producers started to be more careful with the content they would allow Casey to read. At number 3 we have Henry Winkler. Henry Winkler, best known for his role as the Fonz on Happy Days, was set to direct Tom Hanks in his much loved buddy cop movie Turner and Hooch. Unfortunately, these two had a pretty rough history together before that though. The Fonz had actually fought with Hanks in character on set of Happy Days for one episode a few years prior. It would appear that Tom wishes he could fight Henry for real though, as rumor has it the two of them didn't get along at all. So much so that a few days into shooting Turner and Hooch with Henry behind the wheel, Hanks ordered Winkler to be removed from set and replaced as director. That's the kind of power Tom Hanks wields. He could just walk on set and be like, no. Not only did Tom complain that Henry's behavior as director was annoying, he complained that Henry was just overall bad at his job. It would take double the average time to reset a shot on set, he had minimal control over his actors, and was apparently very frustrated with having a dog on set. Like, did he even read the script before he took the gig? The dog is a national treasure. What makes this firing even more tragic is the fact that when Winkler was delivered the news, one of the film's producers ripped Henry's contract up right in front of his face. Over the years, when asked about the incident, Henry denies that he ever had any kind of personal or professional issues with Tom, but like Tom's never given us a reason to think he would lie about something like that. What would he have to gain? At number 2, we have Eric Stoltz. Let's talk a bit about the 1985 comedy sci-fi Back to the Future. I loved this movie growing up. The story followed Marty McFly, a high school student who was accidentally sent back to 1955 in a time machine invented by his close friend and scientist Dr. Emmett Brown, played by Christopher Lloyd, and is forced to get his future parents together before he disappears from existence. Whoever pitched this movie must have been lacking sleep. The film went on to spawn 2 sequels, creating what is considered to be the greatest film trilogy of all time. While Michael J. Fox may have played the iconic Marty McFly, he was not the first actor to don the puffy vest on set. A young man named Eric Stoltz was initially cast to play the role. You may not recognize Eric's face, as his most famous character was drenched in prosthetics and makeup, playing the character of Roy L. Dennis in the film Mask as a man with several facial and skull deformities. He was nearly halfway through shooting the flick when the news came that he was going to be replaced with Michael J. Fox. Fox was the director Robert Zemeckis' first choice, but was initially unable to sign onto the project due to his prior commitment to the sitcom Family Ties. Eventually though, the two studios were able to find a way to work out his schedule and allow him to film both projects simultaneously. This is why you may notice a majority of Marty's scenes that take place outside are at night, as it was the only time he could film for a good 60% of the shoot. Robert wanted Eric out from the beginning, however his portrayal of the character was far more intense than the writers had in mind. Not to mention, Eric read the end of the movie as tragic tragedy instead of a happy ending. Spoiler alert, at the end of the first film, Marty returns to 1985 after successfully getting his parents together, but instead of being poor and depressed, the family is now thriving and successful. Somehow Eric took this as Marty becoming an outsider in the world. His intensity combined with the depressing performance of the finale got him kicked off the shoot only minutes after Fox was available. And at number 1 we have Lindsay Lohan. She got her start acting at the age of just 3, starring in over 60 TV spots and commercials for brands like Gap, Pizza Hut, and Jell-O. She had her big break when Disney cast her to play 2 roles in the classic family comedy The Parent Trap. She played twin sisters Haley Parker and Annie James, who randomly meet at summer camp and discover their parents split them up when they were babies following a divorce. Her career only seemed to rise from there, starring in several cult classics like Freaky Friday with Jamie Lee Curtis and Mean Girl as the main character Katie Heron. Her spot on this list, however, comes from the last roles before her hiatus in the 2013 film The Canyons, starring alongside adult film star James Dean in the leading role. Her reputation was tarnished enough by 2013, but it was made even worse after an audio clip was released of Lohan berating her co-star on set for not performing a line properly. Lindsay was annoyed and took several shots at Dean, telling him to do his damn job. According to James, Lohan was aggressive towards him from the very beginning, apparently being upset that he was taking time off from adult films to attempt a career in the real world.